Hello. Yes. Thank you very much. This is Jeff Sachs speaking, and let me thank you very, very much for inviting me to participate in this important meeting on the governance implications of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I really want to thank all of you for the very thoughtful program that you put together. And I want to give my special thanks to Dr. Soo-Gil Young, the organizer and director of the Korea chapter of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I don't know of a harder working individual or of an individual more dedicated to sustainable development than Dr. Young, and really grateful for all your work and efforts and for your kindness in supporting the Sustainable Development Goals, and also for inviting me to participate in today's session. The Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, both of which were reached within a few weeks of each other at the end of last year, define a universal agenda. That is that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted at the United Nations General Assembly on September 25th and the Paris Climate Agreement adopted at COP21 on December 12 are universal agreements. Every United Nations member state has agreed to put the 17 Sustainable Development Goals into the national policy framework and the national planning framework. And of course, every one of the 193 United Nations member states has agreed to follow the principles of the Paris Climate Agreement to decarbonize the energy system so that we can keep global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, and even try to keep the warming to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. These two agreements are closely linked, and the Sustainable Development Goal number 13, which is to control the climate change, incorporates the Paris Climate Agreement of December 12. And so one could think about the Paris Climate Agreement as being a subset of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's important, as I'm sure everybody appreciates, that the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, therefore are in principle different from the Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, because the MDGs were an agenda to fight poverty, and the rich countries like Korea were involved in the MDGs mainly through development assistance, whereas the SDGs are a universal agenda in which all countries have to make internal reforms, including internal governance reforms, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals within each country, as well as to continue the tradition of the rich countries helping the poor countries. At the core of the Sustainable Development Goals is a holistic agenda. That means that we need an integrated national strategy that addresses 4 basic dimensions. The economic dimension, which is for economic development and quality social services for health and education, and for quality infrastructure. The social dimension, which is for gender equality and for low income inequality. The environmental dimension, which is for a low carbon economy and for a protection of the ecosystems, both marine and land-based ecosystems. And the fourth pillar is good governance. Now, this is also a relatively long-term agenda. This is not about the business cycle or the short-term macroeconomic period. The Sustainable Development Goals cover the period to the year 2030, a 15-year horizon, and the Paris Climate Agreement really covers the period up to the middle of the century, 2050, and even beyond that for the decarbonization of the energy system. Another point that I would add about the governance is that these goals are to apply both to the national scale, the local scale of the major cities, so that Seoul or Busan or other cities of Korea should also be pursuing sustainable development, and to regional cooperation within East Asia, for example. So these goals are not only holistic and long-term, but they operate at many different levels of governance, from the most local level, even the village level in countries that still have large rural areas, to metropolitan areas, to national scale, and to regional scale. Finally, these goals are quantitative. They should be based on national quantitative targets and national quantitative indicators. And one of the key responsibilities of every country is to produce a set of timely indicators for each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, in addition to the national commitments, there are global processes, of course. The SDGs have a global process, and the Paris Climate Agreement has a global process. For the Sustainable Development Goals, the global process is organized by the United Nations, and there is a new political framework called the High-Level Political Forum, which is a new institution of the General Assembly that will take the responsibility for oversight of the Sustainable Development Goals. Every year, there will be a high-level review of the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals, generally at the ministerial level. And every 4 years, there will be a global summit, and that will be at the head of state level. There's also a process of global collection of harmonized data, which is just getting started. And there's an independent expert group advising the United Nations on the selection of the key indicators for the SDGs. Also, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network will be producing a SDG index, and we will release the first version of the Sustainable Development Goal Index this July on the occasion of the first meeting of the High-Level Political Forum. Of course, the Paris Climate Agreement has its own global governance within the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and that is a continuation of the COP process. So the Paris COP21 will be followed in November by the COP22, which will be hosted by the government of Morocco in Marrakesh. And under the Paris Climate Agreement, every country is responsible for submitting two major plans. One is the national contribution to the year 2030. And the second one is a low emission development strategy to the year 2050. So the Paris Climate Agreement is also pushing on every country to have medium-term plans to 2030, like the SDGs, and long-term energy plan to the year 2050. Finally, at the global level, there are a number of efforts to create new financial institutions to help finance the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, and especially new institutions to enable the high-income countries to make a meaningful contribution to investments in the poor countries so that the poor countries can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. And let me quickly mention that these include the new Green Climate Fund, which is hosted in Incheon, of course, and where Korea is the host country, and I believe has an important responsibility to help ensure the success of the Green Climate Fund. There's also an initiative to create a new global fund for education. There will be a report of a commission led by former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown that I believe will recommend the establishment of a global fund for education. And I'm very much hoping that Korea will be a founding member of that global fund. There is also an effort to create new financing for the health sector, which is SDG number 3. And there will be many different developments, including the replenishment of the global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria in Canada later this year, where Korea can play an important role. Let me add that on the funding side, I hope that Korea becomes a member of the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank that China has started, and a participant with China and Japan and others in the One Belt, One Road initiative to link East Asia with Europe, because I believe that's also part of the success of the Sustainable Development Goals. I also look to Korea to play a larger role in global official development assistance. You know, Korea has promised to increase its development aid to at least 0.25 of 1% of national income. But the effort is not really on track right now. And I think that it's important for Korea, as one of the world's most successful economies and richest economies, to increase the official development assistance. Part of that would go through global organizations like the Green Climate Fund or the new Global Fund for Education, but part should also be bilateral. And KOICA has been proposing to promote the concepts of Semayul Undang, the New Village movement for Africa's rural development. And this is something that I'm very much in favor of. So let me finally say that, of course, Korea is a very successful economy, a wonderful success story in development. I have spent much of my professional life watching Korea's great success, and I'm very inspired by it. So Korea has become a high-income country. Poverty is very low. Healthcare is very successful. The education sector is very successful. Korea has achieved tremendous things during the past 2 generations, maybe the world's most successful development. But for Korea's own sustainable development, I think it's important for Korea to focus on the areas that still need attention. One of them is the future of the energy sector, so that Korea plays a leadership role in decarbonizing the economy and helping the world to protect itself against climate change. I also think that it's very important for Korea to play a global leadership role in helping the poorer countries. Korea understands development. It achieved what almost no other country has achieved. And I really look to Korea to help share that successful experience with the low-income countries of Asia and also, of course, the low-income countries of Africa. And in this regard, I would like to see a very active role of Korea in the international financing for climate, for health, for education, and for infrastructure. And I believe that such a forward-looking action would be very well received in the world and also very good for Korea's role in the world, its role economically and its role diplomatically. So let me say that this is the agenda, and Korea needs to identify the priorities for the SDGs, set national targets, work towards them, which Korea always does with great success, and to participate at a high level in the global diplomacy to help the lagging countries to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals as well. Finally, let me say that with the leadership of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who really made a phenomenal achievement to have both the SDGs and the climate agreement. This is a great, great legacy of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, making his period as Secretary General one of the most successful in modern history. There is really the opportunity for Korea to continue that global leadership, and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which Secretary General Ban asked me to help develop, provides a global network of universities and think tanks that are cooperating together to help governments to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I really am grateful to the Korea chapter of SDSN and want to emphasize to you how I believe that Korea's great institutions like KDI and Korea University and Seoul National University and many others can play a very decisive role internationally in developing the concepts and the know-how to achieve the SDGs. Let me thank you for your time. I know I ran a couple of minutes over my allotted period, but I thank you for your graciousness for inviting me today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. Forgive me for this surprise intervention. I wanted to convey my words of gratitude to you directly for supporting the SDS in Korea, as well as this conference in particular. And I also wanted to ask you whether you would be willing to entertain 1 or 2 questions from the Korean audience over here. Would that be okay with you?
Of course I would, Sugil. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. 어디 질문 한두 분 좀 받아볼까요? Yeah, okay. There we have Miss Moon Ju-yeon, who represents the SDSN Youth Korea.
Wonderful.
Okay, let's go. Go ahead.
Hello, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. It's such a great honor to listen to your speech and message that are delivered to a Korean audience. So my name is Ju-yeon, and I'm also a master's student majoring in environmental science and ecological engineering. And I also recently joined in the SDS in Korea in the youth chapter. We're now trying to promote the activities of SDS in Korea, and we're very much enjoying it. My question is very simple. Could you kindly deliver messages that are addressed to younger generations in Korea, like myself? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for Korea SDSN Youth. I'm really grateful and inspired that you are taking on this challenge. I would ask the youth to do two things in particular. One is to help emphasize for Korea the importance of Korea's role in the climate change agenda. This is a challenge for Korea because if you look at all of the Sustainable Development Goals, Korea is excellent across so many different areas. But when it comes to the energy system, of course, Korea, like most economies, remains a fossil fuel dependent economy on imported oil and natural gas and coal, and has to make a transition to a low-carbon economy. And I think young people really know this and understand the climate change issue. And as students in environmental engineering, you could help to design these strategies for the long-term, low-emission economy. And I think that this would be a great exercise for young people to work with your professors and work to promote the ideas of a low-carbon economy for Korea's future. And also because the Green Climate Fund is based in Korea and just getting started, perhaps Korea's SDSN youth could make contact with the Green Climate Fund and say, we are young people, lots of talent, lots of technical expertise, and we want to help the Green Climate Fund as interns or to promote the ideas of the Green Climate Fund. And I don't know, but perhaps there would be a good connection there. The second point for Korean youth, I think, is to help translate Korea's successes to success in today's poor countries. You know, I have had many wonderful Korean students, a superstar student of ours now at the KDI school, Dr. Kim Bu-yel, who has worked in Africa and helped to promote good strategies for poverty reduction in African countries. And I know how many Korean young people are interested in that kind of effort. And I would like Korean young people to encourage the Korean government and KOICA to be very ambitious because Korea has become a rich country. It happened pretty quickly, but it gives an opportunity for Korea really to share its experience. And when you have great companies like LG or Samsung and others who are at the cutting edge of world technology, and you have Korea's government effort, for instance, through KOICA, and you have Korean young people who are dedicated to global sustainable development, it gives a chance for a kind of three-way cooperation of government, young people, and the business sector to implement very innovative programs in other countries as well. So this is something that I would like to encourage that Korean SDSN youth also take on. And thank you very much for what you're doing and for asking the question.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think you have given a huge workload for Korean SDSN youth, but I think that they are very grateful for that work program that you have set for them. Thank you very much. Do you have time for one more Q&A? Jeff?
I do. If you have time, I have time.
Okay, here is one more. intervention from the floor. Here is Mr. Chun. Please, go ahead.
All right,
You have
thank you,
very
Jeffrey.
Short, brief.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation and thanks for your bright perspective on Korean future. And I have a question, the other side of the bright future of Korea. What do you think the most threatening factor of Korean Peninsula in terms of pursuing sustainable development goal?
And are you asking specifically about the issues of North Korea and South Korea?
Yeah, including
or
North
something
Korea. Yeah, we
specific
have a
about
lot of
South
complications and complexes in Korean Peninsula. What do you think the most threatening factor?
What is the most serious sustainable development challenge for Korea, including or excluding North Korean issues?
Well, you know, of course, the most important issue for the Korean Peninsula is peace and a political reconciliation in the future. And this is of course, something that we're all really hoping for and is a very complex challenge. But if the occasion were to develop where North Korea would be reforming society and economy, of course, we know that the well-being of the people of the North would benefit phenomenally. And that would be a huge national effort for Korea. There's no doubt that this is going to be, at some point, we hope soon, an opportunity for a national reconciliation and peace on the peninsula. And this would, of course, change the agenda tremendously because Korea would be devoting a tremendous amount of national effort to whether it's unification or some kind of political reconciliation and economic reform in the North would be a historic occasion. I was involved very much in the transformation in Eastern Europe after 1989, with the political changes after 1989. And I can tell you, as you know very well, it's a huge, huge effort that takes 10 to 20 years at a minimum to bring about. So that's the top issue from a geopolitical point of view of looking at the whole peninsula. For the Republic of Korea, the biggest challenge, other than that huge historic challenge, is, I think, the transformation of the energy system. Because if you look at all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals on poverty, hunger, health, education, water, electrification, job creation, infrastructure, inequality, and so forth, Korea ranks well on most of these measures. It ranks exceptionally well on some of these measures. But when it comes to climate and the quality of life and sustainability of cities and the conservation of the ecosystems, I think that there's more to do. And certainly when it comes to the energy system, Korea now has carbon emissions of about 12 tons per Korean per year. And the United States is at about 16 tons per person per year. All of our economies are going to have to go down to zero emissions per person by around 2060 or 2070. And that means that Korea is going to have to get on a path of decarbonization. And this is going to be involving many choices. What kind of energy system? How much nuclear power? What kind of options for renewable energy? These are complicated questions where I don't think there are very easy answers right now. And they will involve very sophisticated engineering, where Korea's engineering expertise will be very, very important. And so that's a big challenge for Korea. And I'm looking forward to deepening the studies of how this can be done in Korea, because I think that that's important for your country and also important as a model for other countries as well.
Thank you, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, for those succinct yet comprehensive keynote speech on the challenges facing Korea. And I'm very much grateful for your sharing with us your very valuable and limited time. There are more questions from the floor, but I think it's very late night over there, and we'll have to let you go. So let me thank you once again, and goodbye and good night.
Thank you to all of you. And once again, Soo-gil, thank you for your leadership, and I want to thank all of you. I'm very excited to learn the outcome of your deliberations, because I'm sure they will be wonderful and very insightful and very inspiring for other countries as well. So thank you very, very much.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you.